concerned. Is it appropriate? Does it fit with your data to talk about this infinite versus finite as a mindset or a practice? How would you talk about it?
Yeah, so I write about it as a mindset.
Yeah.
When I was writing the book, I originally used it as an adjective, like an infinite leader or a finite leader.
Mm-hmm.
But that was unfair
Mm-hmm.
because I don't think either of those definitions are absolute.
Mm-hmm.
You can have both. And the infinite game is not the absence of finite games, it's the context within which they exist.
Totally.
So, for example, you want to be healthy, you can still have finite goals. I want to lose X amount of weight by X date. But the difference is that those goals serve a higher purpose. That's the context, that's the infinite component. They're not absolute, and one can learn or adjust to the other one. So I think it is fair to call it a mindset.
For me to weigh in case you're interested, it feels like a mindset with very actionable practices that support it.
Well, I hope so.
Yeah, not unlike Carol Dweck's work, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think when people have actionable steps without the mindset,
yeah,
it's blind,
mm-hmm.
or it's kind of like you're following somebody else's formula. You know, it's
totally.
like going to a company and saying, you know, you have such great morale. How do you do it? You're like, well, we have ping pong tables in every conference room. And like, I go back and put ping pong tables in all my conference room and morale doesn't change at all. You know, it's like following a list of best practices without understanding the reason behind them and what's underlying those choices and decisions. I think the mindset really matters, because then I think when you have the right mindset, yes, you can look to others and what they did, but you can actually be more creative and hand pick and choose the things that you think
that's right
apply to you, that are useful to you. So I think mindset is definitely a foundation for sure.
Okay, so I'm going to take it one step further, and then I'm going to start
beating me up,
unloading on you. Yeah, I am totally. I wish y'all could see him, because I can see him on Zoom, and he's got a laugh where one eyebrow goes up, and it says, I'm curious, but it also says, one eyebrow says, I'm curious, the other eyebrow says, bring it. That's the look I'm getting from Simon right now. Okay. So fair to call it a mindset, which is a theoretical foundation. The defining principles is the mindset, but then it's got practices that have to be acted upon in order. You can't just have the mindset. You have to do the practices too, right?
Of course. It's like I have the mindset of being healthy.
Right.
Still got to work out and eat celery.
Right. I refuse to believe that that's all there is to it. I can eat something really good, but I'm going to have to work out, which I like, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. I am an infinite girl living in a finite world.
Unpack that for me. You mean the finite world of academia?
Well, finite.
Because the world is infinite.
Maybe. Let me think about another way to say it. The world is infinite. You're so right that you're not either a finite leader or an infinite leader, because when I am my best self, I am an infinite thinker, an infinite leader, an infinite parent. And when I am in fear and scarcity, and the vulnerability is breaching the levees, I turn toward finite thinking, and I'm rewarded for it in the short term.
That sounds accurate for all human beings. I think that's an extremely good insight. Finite is easier. The rewards are immediate. We react to the thing in front of us. Infinite is more difficult. We have to consider effects that we cannot imagine. We have to recognize that we're contributing to something that we may never see realized, and we simply count steps towards, where finite is about a series of win, 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 and about making yourself feel good in the moment. An infinite mindset is recognizing that you're a part of a continuum, and the decisions you make have an impact on that continuum. There's a Chinese story, it's told many different ways. The way I know it is a young man is born with a remarkable ability for horse riding, and everyone in the village says, you're so lucky, and the monk says, we'll see, and he falls off his horse and breaks his leg and his career is destroyed, and everyone in the village says, you're so unlucky, and the monk says, we'll see. And then war breaks out and all the men are sent to battle, and he can't go because of his busted leg, and everyone in the village says, you're so lucky, and the monk says, we'll see. And like, that's one of the big impacts that this work has had on me, which is good news, bad news, who knows what, you know? And all of us will say, if we look back at our own lives and careers and we look at the trials and tribulations that we faced, that we don't want to go through them again, but we're all kind of a little secretly glad they happened.
Yeah.
You know, somebody asked me a question the other day, which is, what would you do differently? And the answer is, I can't answer that question, because I am who I am today. I am where I am today because of everything that happened. And if I did anything differently, then I don't know where I would be. This wouldn't be it.
Right.
It's a continuum.
And you couldn't even reflect back on the question.
Can't even reflect back on the question. It's actually an impossible question. Because my greatest lessons came from the biggest times of pain and tragedy. Some lessons I missed and unfortunately was forced to learn them again.
Again and again, yeah.
And the goal is to pass it on. That's the infinite component, which is it's responsible for all of us to teach it, whether it's to our friends, to our children, whatever it is. We have to pass on the lessons and learn the lessons that get passed on to us. And this idea of continuum as well has changed my view of even myself, which is I don't think of myself as in terms of strengths and weaknesses anymore. What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? Oh, I'm a perfectionist. That's my biggest thing. You know? I think it's nonsense because it's all context. It all requires context. So, for example, I am chronically disorganized. I mean, it's embarrassing, right? And for years, I'd say it's a weakness, and I would struggle with it, and I'd try all these methodologies to keep me organized, and they'd last for like a week, and then they'd fall off. You know, I've downloaded every app, and I would just call it a weakness. The more I started to embrace this concept of finite and infinite, I looked back at my own life, and I remembered a specific time when my career was just getting going, and there was no book, no TED Talk or anything like that, but I had this little idea called the Golden Circle and the concept of why. And I was at a networking event, and a guy said, Simon, you're onto something. I want to hire you. You have to come and help my business. Gave me his business card, and I promptly lost it. And any organized young entrepreneur would have been texting him from the taxi, emailing him then the next day, but Yahoo over here had lost the card, so there's nothing I could do. 2 weeks later, I found the business card at the bottom of a bag covered in dust bunnies and called the guy and went, hey, do you remember we met 2 weeks ago? And he wanted to work with me even more because he thought I was busy.
Yeah.
So was it a weakness? If I was organized, I might have come across as too eager.
Yeah.
So now, if somebody asks me to do something and I forget to do it and I let them down, then in that context, it's a weakness. In the other context, it's a strength. So there's no such thing as strength and weakness. It's all contextual. And so the opportunity we have is to be aware of the characteristics that we have, to know how we show up, and to try as best we can to put ourselves in the context where that thing is a strength or mitigate it in the times where it might be a weakness. But it's not a good or bad or right or wrong. It's just us.
I've been thinking a lot about whys and the whys. I think one of the great things about being laid off is I've had a lot of time to think, more than usual. And in a way, I want to say that a terrible situation was a great situation in that I was able to take the time to reevaluate my goals, reevaluate my purpose, my why. Because I think when you kind of get in the motion of things, it's hard to sort of reflect and think about things, the important stuff. And a lot more recently, I've been really reflecting, especially now that I'm applying to jobs, kind of seeing what my why is. Like, what am I really looking for? What's my purpose? And when I had graduated college, something that I really, really, really wanted with my first real big girl job was I wanted to feel like I was a part of something. So in the beginning, 6 years ago, I didn't really care so much about money. And I'm very grateful and blessed that I wasn't in a situation where that had to be the number one importance. To me, what was important was I wanted to be part of a team, part of a company where I felt like what I was doing mattered. And I wanted to feel like I was doing something important. And I did. That was something that I literally stepped into. Like, my job was really important. I was doing something that mattered. My job, if I didn't do my job every day, then it directly negatively impacted the company and it would not be good. And I mean, for better or for worse, like, if I didn't do my job, then the business would kind of not be okay. And I got what I wanted. And that was my purpose. And that got me going for a really long time with my job. So now that I'm looking for work, I've changed, I've grown, I've evolved, and my why is a lot different. I no longer want to feel needed. I've sort of changed that. As I've been healing and unpacking stuff, I don't really want to feel needed. I think for like now, my why is different, and I've sat on that for a few days where I was like, okay, well, what do I want with my next role? And after a lot of thinking, I think what I do want is I want to feel inspired. I want to be in a place where I feel like I'm growing. I want a job that adds value to my life and adds to my personal life. I don't want to do a job where I feel like it's taking away from my life, where it's taking away from my personal life. I want something that will add value to my life in whatever capacity, whether it be creatively, my interests, anything really. I want it to add. I don't want it to take away. And I want somewhere where I could continue growing professionally and also personally. And I want that growth to be gentle. I don't want it to be harsh. I don't want it to be rough or tough. I want it to feel nice, because that's been really important to me. Very recently, these past couple of years, I want change and growth to happen gently, not so rough and tough like it has in the past. Yeah, I'm kind of tired of that stuff. I want things to happen a lot more gently. But yeah, that's been something on my mind. And I've been listening to a lot of podcasts these past couple of days. I've been trying to get more into podcasts because I want to feed my mind vegetables. That's kind of how I phrase it. I want to feed my mind vegetables, because I kind of forget, but it's really important to feed your mind good stuff. So listen to educational things that you want to learn about. Listen to self-help stuff. I've been listening to a lot of Brene Brown, a lot of sinek, a lot of Oprah Winfrey, a lot of one of my favorites is what's her name? Marie Forleo. All these awesome people who are very growth-minded, very infinite mindseted, very awesome people who have like a really good energy, and it kind of gets you going, gets you motivated, and I love it. And it's been getting me motivated to like listen to stuff. And I mean, listening to that sort of thing kind of gets you going, where if I feel a little down, or I don't feel too great one day or one morning, I put on one of these podcasts like the one I did, and it gets you feeling really motivated, and it kind of picks you back up. So that's why I like that sort of thing. And it also feeds your mind really healthy words, healthy affirmations, healthy practices that you sort of end up just picking up on naturally without you even realizing it, which is pretty awesome. So that's something I'm trying to tap back into nowadays to get me going and get me feeling inspired, because when you're getting rejection letters, it can feel really tough. And I'm trying to like redo my resume to see if I get something different, because one of the things is, if you keep the biggest thing of insanity is doing the same thing over again and expecting different results. So I'm trying to change things up a bit. I think it's really important to ask yourself at least once a year, or as often as you can, what your why is, and reminding yourself why you're doing the things that you're doing. And I think I'm realizing how important that is, because I am noticing that as we change and grow as humans, our why changes all the time. So the why that I mentioned when I was graduating college isn't the same why that I have right now. And I think as we learn about ourselves, and as we shed the old parts of ourselves and learn about the new parts of ourselves, and how we step into, bigger versions of who we are, we find that our why shifts and evolves differently, which is like really sick. And like, you wouldn't really understand it until you really take a look at it. And I was watching this TED Talk with this woman. The TED Talk was so affirming, because she was saying how your why, whether you know what it is or not, and I think a big point is everyone has a why, whether you're aware of the why or not. And everyone makes a promise to themselves. Everybody has a vow. Everyone has something that they're leading by. And that's the thing that sort of carries you through life. So it's the reason why you wake up every morning. It's the reason why you go to work. It's the reason why you do stuff. And something really important is to understand what your why is, because if you understand it, or if you figure it out, then you can see if that's a why that you actually want. Because you find that sometimes maybe your why isn't a why that you actually like. I think in the TED Talk, she made an example of a teenage girl, and the teenage girl had a baby as a teenager. And when she had the baby, she made a promise to herself. And she was like, I am not going to be a teenage statistic. She's not going to be a teenage statistic. And she told herself that she didn't want to be another number, another teenage tragedy. And that was a promise that she made to herself. So without her even realizing it, that became her why for the next 10 years. So when she had the baby, she ended up becoming this very successful person in her career, and she had everything that she wanted. And I think eventually, after 10 years, the woman said that without the girl realizing it, now a woman, she achieved her why. So she was not a teenage statistic. And she found that she reached a point in her life where she felt lost. And the reason she felt lost is because her why was now completed. Like, her why wasn't valid anymore because she did what she said she wanted to do. She rose above being a statistic. So now she felt really lost because she didn't have a new why to guide her life actions. And I thought that was just so affirming and interesting, because if I take a look at my own life, and maybe if you take a look at your own, you find that the moments in which you do maybe feel lost and confused and sort of like, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing next. I think for me, those moments are moments where I have to take a look at my why and reevaluate things and be like, okay, what am I really doing? And why am I waking up in the morning? Like, what's getting me going? Why do I want to do? Like, is my why still relevant? And I think I said it before, like, yeah, that's something I'm taking a look at right now. Like, what am I looking for my next job? What is my next why that is motivating me forward for the next few years? Like, what am I now holding on to? And kind of reevaluating what it is that I want out of life right now, and what's getting me going, what's making me feel alive, inspired, and motivated to keep going. Because I know for me, something that will never change and has never really changed is my why for personal evolution. And something I found recently is that there isn't one why. So I think it's easy to think that, like, oh, there's one life why, there is one why for everything. But I was like, well, I have a why for my personal evolution, I have a why for my job, I have a why for my life, I have a why for, like, I think there could be different whys, and maybe there's one overarching why, I don't know. But I know for me, my why for working on myself is I enjoy the feeling of just being better, because it just feels better. Like, you just feel it, like, it just feels good. And I also like the feeling of, in me being a better version of myself, I'm also helping inspire others. I'm helping others step into different versions of themselves. So it's like a win-win. Like, me working on myself is benefiting me, and it's benefiting other people. So that's just a why that will always inspire me and motivate me to be better, so that when I am facing a really tough trauma, a really tough experience, a really tough feeling, I have those two things to hold on to get me going, to be like, you know what, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Because whenever I do it, I feel really good, and my life just elevates. So for my personal evolution, that's my why. Now I'm trying to figure out what my why is for my career. And I sort of already mentioned, like, what that is and what I think that I want that to be. So having that in mind, I trust that in me having that why, my career is gonna unfold in that way, where I'm going to look for those opportunities. I'm gonna attract that energy, and I'm gonna step into that for my next job. And I trust that that's gonna happen because it happened when I graduated college. So I feel pretty good, you know? So yeah, I have a whole list of what I want, I think my new whys are. And I think that's really awesome. Like, I think it's really important to take a look at why you're doing everything, because there is a reason, you know? There is a reason you do stuff. You don't really think about it, but there is. And maybe the reason you're doing it isn't a reason that you want to do it. Maybe it's based on old agreements, old versions of yourselves that you outgrew. And I think it's important to take a look at your why, because then you could be like, okay, is my why aligning with the person who I am and the person who I want to be? Because I think everyone wants to be something better. It's kind of the reason why you admire certain qualities about people. It's why you feel drawn to certain people, why you feel drawn to certain experiences, intuitively, because you're drawn to things that you want to embody. You're drawn to qualities that you want to embody. You're drawn to different experiences, people, qualities that will help you step into a person you want to step into. And I think everyone should think about this, because I think we all have this image of who we want to become, or who we think are, what we think our potential is. And it's really hard to think about it, because it comes with pressure of like, I don't know, like it feels scary and intimidating to step into my potential, because what if I fail? What if I don't do what I think? What if I'm not good enough? What if, all this what if, and it's really scary. So you don't want to think about it too much. But I think it's important to think about all the qualities that you want, the person you want to become. What is your ideal version of yourself? And it's not to say that you're going to write all this down because you're going to be that perfect version of yourself. But what can you do to get you going there? Baby steps, a little bit at a time, to get you moving in that direction. Because in doing that, I think you won't fall back, or like you'll be less likely to fall back, and you will quickly bounce back from falling back into old patterns. So when you find yourself doing an old pattern that you didn't want to do, and you're like, oh man, I made a mistake, I messed up, you having that in mind of like, okay, this is who I want to become, you're more likely to have a quicker bounce back and go back on that path of like becoming who you want to become. So if you want to become more of a leader, you want to become more courageous, you want to become more vulnerable, you want to become more self-assured, you want to be better at spending time alone, you want to, whatever it is that you want to do, if you have that in mind, if that's the version of yourself you want to step into, you will do things naturally to get you going there, whether you notice it or not, which is the beautiful thing about our minds and bodies. We will get ourselves to the places we want to get to. We just have to know where we want to go, because if we don't know, then we're going to be guided to places we don't want to go, and you find that life will show you experiences and people until you get the message. So if you keep repeating a cycle, you're going to keep repeating it until you get the message, until you realize what you got to realize. So it's all of that, and I think all of that ties in with finding your why. And I think I just wanted to talk about today about the importance of finding your why, because it's really important. And you find that when you write down all the things that you want and ask yourself why it is that you want that, and make sure that the reason you want it is a reason that aligns with who you are, not a version of yourself that you want to outgrow. So if you want, if you want a promotion, ask yourself, why do I want a promotion? Do you want a promotion because you feel like it will help you, grow, it will help you develop, it will lead you down the path you want to lead down to become the person you want to become? Or do you want a promotion because you feel like that will make you feel validated, that will make you feel this feeling that you feel like when you get it, it might not fill what you want to fill. I think it's hard to explain, but you just want to make sure that the things you want are coming from a place of alignment, not from a place of filling a void. And I think that's the best way I could explain it. You want to make sure that everything you want in life, every why that you have, is not coming from a place of filling a void. And I think it's easy to fall into that. It's easy to say you want a relationship because you don't want to be alone, even if you don't want to admit it. If you ask why, you want to make sure that's not the reason. Because if you want a relationship because you don't want to feel alone, it's not going to help you not feel alone. It's just going to cover it up. And you're going to still feel that even when you're with that person. And you're going to have these cycles repeat themselves. So you want to make sure you're in something for the right reason, and really ask yourself why you want something so badly, because you don't want to fall into a bad pattern. You want to break a cycle, and if it's because, I think the one that people really struggle with is doing things because they don't want to feel alone. And I think a big thing is asking yourself, like, why do I struggle being alone? Because I had to ask myself that a few years ago. Like, what is it about it? Like, what am I so scared of? And really sitting with yourself, asking yourself, and first growing really comfortable with it, so that when you grow really comfortable with the things you're scared of, you're not really seeking it. So then you're able to enter a relationship with more security and more of a clear vision. Like, okay, this is why I actually want it. I just want someone to spend time with. I want someone to travel with. I want someone who adds to my life, not like fills a hole, And you could apply that with other stuff, like wanting a job, wanting a promotion because you feel like the promotion is going to help you grow into a leader. It's going to help you grow into a better public speaker, help you grow into a better professional that's going to get you aligning with your career passion. I think in the TED Talk, the woman says she grew up wanting to be in theater. And the reason she wanted to be in theater was because she wanted to move people. She wanted to evoke a feeling in people. And that was the reason. It wasn't so much the theater, it was what she wanted. It was the message, or like what she wanted out of it. And she found it not being in theater. Like, she found that she was able to achieve that why through public speaking, through giving TED Talks. She was able to evoke a feeling, inspire people, So sometimes, like, what you want might not be that thing. It might be something deeper. So take a look at what that deeper thing is, because I think that will help you avoid making a lot of mistakes of being like, whoa, I thought if I got this thing, it would solve all my problems. I thought if I did this, I would be happy. And then a lot of people find themselves, they get the thing that they think they wanted, but then they don't feel what they thought they would feel. And I think that comes from you thinking that that thing would help you achieve or help you fill that hole that you were looking to fill, when you really had to look at not what that thing was, but what were you looking for with that thing. So what are you looking for when you say, I really want this, I really want this? Like, what are you really wanting? Is it that thing, or is it something below that thing? Asking yourself and really allowing yourself to be honest with yourself, because you can't lie to yourself. You could try to, but you know when you are. And the more you lie to yourself, the harder things are going to be, because it won't feel like, it'll feel really heavy, and then you'll carry all this heavy stuff, and you don't want to do that. So I feel like I said a lot, but I think that was pretty much it. I think I just wanted to have an open conversation of all the things I've been thinking about nowadays, these past few days. So yeah, I invite everybody on the interwebs to think about their why. Why do you doing what you're doing? And are you happy with why you're doing what you're doing? And if you're not happy, then, you could change it. Everything's changeable. Nothing is set in stone. Who you were yesterday doesn't have to be the person you are today. Doesn't have to be the person you are tomorrow. You can change anything you want. No one's holding you to it. The only person holding you to stuff is yourself. And yeah, be a little kinder to yourself. Allow yourself the chance to change your mind. Sometimes we make mistakes because we didn't know. But sometimes we have to make a mistake to understand what we do know. And if you make a wrong choice, it's okay to make a wrong choice, because you making that wrong choice helps you understand what the right choice was, And nothing's life or death, hopefully. So if you buy a pair of shoes and you're like, oh man, I don't like these shoes, you could return it. You could buy a new pair of shoes. You don't have to force yourself to wear those shoes, If you make a bad choice. Things could change. If you buy a house and you're like, oh man, I hate this house, you could sell it and buy a new house. Things could change. If you pick a person that you're like, oh man, I picked the wrong person, that's fine. You could break up with them, choose another person. Things in life are changeable. And I think just understand that, the whole process of life is just learning from your mistakes. As long as you learn from your mistakes, you're fine. You'll make a better one. You'll keep learning. And then over time, you kind of find your way and you'll feel a lot better about stuff. So that's what I'm learning. And I wanted to share that with you. So one thing I do want to talk about, I saw the movie Thunderbolts yesterday. I went on a solo date. It was very lovely. I was going to take myself out to dinner afterwards and take myself out for a nice dinner, a nice cocktail, because I love a nice cocktail and I love some nice food. So I was going to go to the Smith after the movies to treat myself to a nice dinner, but it was pretty late. So I was like, I'll do this another time. But maybe another day I'll do another date. And I'll take myself out to a nice dinner. But I took myself out to a nice movie date around one of my favorite neighborhoods, which was 72nd Street, Lincoln Center. It's a neighborhood that is very dear to my heart because I went to high school in that area. So I love. I love the Upper West Side. I love Lincoln Center. I love Columbus Circle. I love that neighborhood. It's very special to me. So I go to that movie theater pretty often. And I went there and I saw Thunderbolts because I just wanted to go out. And it was a great movie. It really spoke on mental health. And it got me thinking about shadow work and the relationship we have with the parts of ourselves that we often don't really want to look at. And it got me thinking about shadow work. So I really want to take some time to talk about it. I don't want to speak on how to do shadow work because I think shadow work is something that is very personal to people. There's really no template. There's no way to how to do it. It kind of just depends on in what ways the darker parts of yourselves shows up. So it's kind of every person has their own way that they should go about dealing with it. So I'm going to talk about all the ways that I've navigated integrating my shadow self because it's something that I like to think about and it's something I've been wanting to talk about, but I've been trying to find a way to talk about it in a way in which I could pay respect to myself and also just share true information because I don't want to spread incorrect information. But yeah, shadow work is really awesome. For the most part, you always have to practice discernment. So I think, listen to your body, listen to yourself, figure out in all the ways in which your shadow self comes out and try to pay attention to it. I think through sharing my own experience, I think maybe it would help the internet homies kind of figure out what applies to their situation. So I'm hoping that would happen. But I'll start with me. Me and my shadow, I want to say that nowadays we're Gucci, we're homies. There's no burnt bridges. We've kind of ironed out our problems. We've talked things out. We're working through stuff. So I think me and my shadow, we have a pretty healthy relationship right now. But it wasn't always this way. Me and my girl, we have a long history, as I think everyone does with their shadow selves. And I think the beginning parts of it is you're not really conscious of it. So for most of my life, I wasn't really conscious of my shadow self. I kind of just figured if there was something I didn't want to deal with, I kind of didn't really think about it. But the things you don't think about have a way of showing up in your life in the unlikeliest of places. So for me personally, my shadow self would show up in my dreams a lot. And I didn't really understand it. So with my dreams, I'm not someone who's ever really had a nightmare. I would say maybe in my life, there's been maybe a handful of times at most where I would be like, oh, okay, that was pretty close to being a nightmare, where maybe I woke up with my heart beating really fast, or I woke up hyperventilating. But for the most part, I don't really have nightmares. I have really vivid, uncomfortable dreams. I have dreams that are would be very jarring, strange, out of the norm. But I'm not really scared of it. Like, I'm not really someone who's frightened of that sort of stuff. So typically, like, within the year, I would say 2018, between 2018 and 2023, my shadow self was on fire. And she was asking to be seen, but I hadn't realized it at that moment. So in the ways in which my shadow was asking to be seen was my dreams. So I would have dreams of very terrible situations that weren't about me, but it was pretty much, my dreams felt like they were all stories, and I was watching a story unfold, and the stories were really bad. Like, if you could think about any terrible situation that could happen in life, I had a dream about it. So, like, really, like, disturbing, very, I don't want to get too specific, but a lot of emotional abuse, a lot of physical abuse, a lot of sexual abuse, any sort of bad thing you could think of, I had a dream about it. And it wasn't necessarily involving me. I was more so the third person kind of watching it unfold, and sometimes I would feel it. A lot of the things with my dreams that happened between 2018 and 2023 is I became a lot more aware of my senses. So sometimes, not so much anymore, but back then, in my dreams, I could feel pain. I could taste foods. I could hear music. I had a lot of the same similar sensations as you would have in your real life. And I've felt pain a lot in my dreams, and it was not fun. I've had dreams where I've been in car accidents, where I've drowned, where there's a lot of bad, any bad thing you could think of, I've had a dream about. And it wasn't scary because I think subconsciously within the dream, I knew it wasn't real. But anyways, the point is, I had really crazy, vivid dreams that were very terrible objectively, and I didn't know why I was having them. I didn't really understand them. I just was like, maybe this was past life experiences that I went through, or maybe, I don't know. There was really no reason why I would be having them, and I didn't really understand it. So I would just kind of been like, I would wake up and either write it down or just be like, well, that's really crazy. But in 2024 is when I really started paying attention to them. And then 2024, I started actually bringing up some of those dreams to therapy. So in my therapy sessions, I'd be like, hey, I've been having these weird dreams. I've always had them, but I've been always wondering about them because I don't really understand them. And I started, for the first time, talking about these dreams with my therapist. And the ones I didn't tell her about all of them, but I brought up to her the ones that were most common. So we would talk it out, and she would be like, well, how did you feel? What did you notice? And over time, I started noticing patterns. And I started noticing certain things. And I was like, I feel like these dreams are trying to tell me something. And then I started noticing things. And then sometimes I would feel this presence in my dreams where it sort of felt like I was seeing something that was coming after me. So then over time, it felt like there was something in my dreams coming after me. And I didn't even know what it was. And then one thing about me in my dreams is I'm a soldier. I'm fearless. So whenever I would see this thing that I felt was coming after me, I would try to go after it. So I would get really angry, and I'd be like, who are you? And I think I said that at one point. I was like, show me your face. Like, who are you? Like, what are you doing? And I noticed the angrier I got to it, and the more I approached it with anger and hatred, the angrier it got, and the more hatred it felt. So then it would approach me back very angry. And I think the first time, I don't ever see myself in my dreams. And I think some people, I've come across people who told me that, they've talked to themselves in their dreams. They've seen themselves in their dreams. I've only seen myself maybe a couple of times. And back then, maybe in 2018, I saw myself for the first couple of times. Ooh, and she wasn't too happy. When I did see myself back then, I was really angry. And I would try to come after myself. I think at one point I spit at myself, and I was like, why would I do that? I didn't understand it. But looking back at it, that was my shadow. And yeah, as I started to really unpack these dreams, I started realizing that, oh, whoa, I think this might be the parts of myself that I'm not looking at, that I'm not paying attention to. And then over time, you start noticing patterns. Now, before I continue, I do want to preface all of this by saying, like, exploring your shadow isn't just something you kind of do on a whim. I feel, at least for me, I'm not going to speak on everyone, but for me, before I felt ready to unpack this, there was a lot of preparation that I had to do. So, first of all, I have a safe space. I think before you like unpack anything really hard, like your shadow self and like all this stuff, I feel like you really have to create a safe energy around you. So a safe mindset. Be in good energy, because you don't want to attract bad energy. You don't want to be in a negative frequency, in a negative headspace. So like, do whatever you have to do. I know some people like to sage a room. Some people like to put on a candle. Some people like to put on really relaxing music. I know for me, something that I've always done is I always wear this necklace. And I've had this necklace of an angel my whole life. And growing up, my mom was always like, oh, it's like your guardian angel. It'll protect you. So I just wear it. I just do stuff like I just try to be in good spirits. So I feel like it's important when you're exploring this sort of stuff to just have a really good safe space around you. So when you are exploring it, you feel this sort of protective energy that you just know you'll be good no matter where you go. So that being said, yeah, a lot of my journey was me first noticing in what areas my shadow would come up. So for me, it was my dreams. It was also in my writing. So I found whenever I would journal during the moments I felt the most sadness. I also noticed that I would feel sad about things that I didn't really understand. So I think a big sign for me was I would often feel existentially sad, where the sadness would come up and I wouldn't really understand it. I would have a lot of intrusive thoughts and be like, oh my God, these intrusive thoughts are crazy. I would have violent intrusive thoughts, very unwarranted intrusive thoughts. I would see things, that I didn't really understand. So a lot of random things I would see, like if I saw a shadow, it's kind of like, those that thing that people do, the doctors, where they hold up a blob of like an ink spot, and they're like, oh, what do you see in this ink spot? And then people are like, oh, I see a butterfly, I see whatever, that sort of thing. So if I would do something, or I would see like a shadow, or I would paint something, and I would look at it, the first thing I would see would be something really scary. And I was like, why do I keep seeing these scary images in like these abstract forms, Like if I saw this abstract painting, I would see a scary clown. If I saw the color red, my brain would think of blood, like all these things that I didn't really understand. And I was like, why? And I would keep pushing it away. So when it was first happening in 2024, I was like, oh my gosh, like what is happening with me? Like I keep seeing all this scary stuff, and it was like kind of scary because I didn't get it. So I would like ignore it. I would have to like push it. I was like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do with this. And then the more I sat with it, the more I realized, like, you know what? I think this is my shadow self really begging for me to see her, because she's leaking. She's coming out in my writing. She's coming out in my dreams. She's coming out in my thoughts. And then I found that the more I really sat with these things, and I think for a long time, there were nights where I would wake up every single night at 3 a.m, 2 a.m, 4 a.m, and I was like, oh my God, I cannot get a full night's sleep. And then, one day I was just like, you know what? I'm just going to sit here and just let it happen. And then I started kind of shifting my mindset, because I think for most of my life, up until 2024, I viewed my shadow self as the enemy. And I was like, this is the enemy. It's coming after me, And then I started shifting it as to being like, okay, well, let me see, how can I be friends with my shadow? How can I try to listen to it? And I sort of view it as like a person, so me trying to get to know her, so I started like shifting my mindset and viewing my shadow not as this dark entity coming out to get me, but I started viewing it as a person. And I was like, okay, how can I get to know you? How can I understand you? How can I like hear what you're trying to say? And when I started viewing it that way, it felt like a lot less scary and more manageable. So when I had weird thoughts, I'll be like, all right, let me listen to what this is trying to tell me, because maybe it's trying to bring up something that I'm not listening to. And if you sort of view it as it being sort of like a kid asking for attention, asking to just be heard, it feels a lot nicer. But the movie Thunderbolts was really good because I don't think I've seen a movie that really speaks on the relationship we have with our subconscious selves, like all of those bad experiences we repress. And it really sort of started a conversation about that, and it handled it sort of beautifully, where it was sort of like, it kind of brought up this idea that everyone is dealing with their own darkness, their own shadow. And it's easy to sort of feel like you're the only one sinking into this void. And there was a scene where two characters were talking about it, and the guy was like, how do you deal with it? How do you deal with sinking into the void? And she looked at him and she was like, she was joking, but she was like, you just shove it really deep down. And then later in the movie, they talk about it again, and she was like, you know what, if I'm being honest, the way you deal with it is you just work with it. She was pretty much like, you just work with it, you don't push it away, you listen to it, and like she was saying, you integrate it, like you try to find a way to work with it and sort of just accept that it's there and it's not going to go anywhere, and figure out a way that you can live with it in harmony, with balance. And I think a lot of that in the movie was the characters accepting the experiences that they didn't want to accept, because it happened and you can't really do anything about it. So a lot of it has to do with acceptance, listening it, acknowledging it, and figuring out how you want to move forward to keep it vague and generic. So in terms of like figuring out a relationship with it, I think, again, this is specific to each person. I'll speak on myself. For me and my shadow, we came to an agreement, and I try my best to listen to her when she has things to say. I'll try not to judge whatever is coming up, and I find outlets. Outlets are really, 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 really helpful for me. So I'll write stuff down without judging what I'm writing. I'll make art without judging what I'm drawing. I'll talk about it. I'll listen to music. I'll find some way to allow that part of myself to express herself without shaming her, without judging what she's saying, and just understanding that she just needs to say what she wants to say, so it's out there and it's acknowledged. Which honestly could feel really hard, because what she might want to say, or what yours might want to say, might not be something you want to hear, or something that you're ready to think about or to accept. And sometimes that's fine, as long as you say it. I think the most important thing is not to ignore it. If you're not ready to see or feel or hear something that your shadow wants to bring up, it's okay to talk to it, to say, hey, not right now, but give me some time and I'll try again next time. Or like, let me just have this moment to, because it's like workable. At the end of the day, your shadow is you. So, the way you approach it is kind of like the way it will approach you. And I think that's also really important, because I found the more I approached my shadow with understanding and compassion, the more I found that, it was willing to work with me to kind of figure out a way that we can like exist together in harmony. Whatever it is that is your specific personal inner growth goal, I think when you have that and you're like, okay, I want to work on this, you find that it sort of opens up this web of other stuff. So I think for me, when I was tackling my the skeletons in my closet. So my shadow stuff, I sort of think of it as like a closet that you're cleaning out, like spring cleaning. So if it's like you're putting all this stuff in storage, so like if there's an experience and you're like, I don't want to deal with this right now, it's like you put it in a box and you put it in a closet. So whatever you don't want to deal with, it sort of feels like you kind of put it in a box and you put it in a closet. But over time, the closet gets really big and stuffed, and it becomes harder and harder to close it. You could even use it as a rug. You put things under the rug, and over time the rug becomes more and more noticeable, and eventually you can't really ignore like the pile. Your body will tell you, which is amazing, what it needs to work on first. So you could just live your life, go about your day, and if you're doing something and you're like, whoa, something's coming up, that's a clue. That's something that feels like it could be ready to feel seen. So then it's kind of like working on it that way. So try not to force yourself to work on stuff you're not ready to focus on, but listen to your body and try to pay attention to what experiences, what memories are showing up for you. All of it really happens in baby steps. And I find the more you focus on integrating your shadow, the nicer it feels to just go about your day, because you don't feel like you have all this stuff weighing down on you and all that just happening. I think once you start dealing with things very slowly, and also reminding yourself that it doesn't have to happen today, it doesn't have to happen in a week, in a month. Like, it's gonna take a while. It's gonna take a few months, it's gonna take a year, it's gonna take 2 years. Like, it's really gonna be a slow process depending how much stuff you have. And honestly, it might just be like a lifelong commitment. And it's a commitment that you want to do because it feels good to kind of like continue bettering yourself, continue letting go of things that no longer serve you, continue shedding the old, adopting the new. Like, the more you do it, the more you gain pleasure out of just growing and unpacking stuff. And then over time, all the scary stuff that you're pushing away doesn't feel so scary, because the more you sort of look at stuff, the more confident and the more strength you gain to continue doing it. Because you're like, okay, if I can look at this, then I could look at this. If I could look at this, then I could look at this. And then what you learn here, you could apply to the next thing. You know what I mean? So a lot of fears, you could start with the small fears. It doesn't have to be crazy. You could start with the small traumas. Again, it doesn't have to be crazy. And you could like take your time, like don't force yourself. A lot of the process with shadow work is having a lot of conversations with yourself. So if you don't feel ready, that's totally fine. Just talk to yourself. Be like, hey, I don't know if we can do this right now. Maybe we can put a pin on it for later. Or if you want to take it easy, take it easy. Do whatever you got to do to feel safe, to do something. And if you feel like you're going too deep and you're not ready, that's cool. Tell yourself you're not ready and revisit it later. I think the nicest thing to know, though, is that like whatever you have to focus on will reveal itself. Like, you don't have to look for it too hard. Like, when you're doing something, it's kind of like if you're going about your day, you notice like a random thought comes up and you're like, oh my God, why am I thinking about this? Don't ignore it. You're thinking about it for a reason. The things about your thoughts is all of your thoughts are trying to tell you something. You know what I mean? So even the ones that are kind of intrusive, like the ones that like, you know, like try to give it some sense of attention. Even if it doesn't mean anything, acknowledge that it might not mean anything, you know, like you don't want to push things away. And it's also pretty cool because then you start noticing things connecting, and it's also like a cool awareness moment. Like, I know for me, the more I talked about my dreams, I noticed like, oh, this dream reminded me of this experience I had in like a few years ago, because the feeling that I had in the dream was the same feeling that I remember having from that memory. And it was like, okay, maybe my dream is telling me that there's something about that memory that I have to really process and take a look at. So then I look at the memory, and then when I look at the memory, I realize, oh, there's all this stuff that maybe I'm carrying with me now that I need to unpack and learn. And then you're like, why? It's a lot of asking whys and whys and whys and whys, and really being brave enough to ask the why, because I know sometimes we don't want to ask the why because maybe we don't want to find the answer, but you kind of have to face it. And I think the more you face the hard whys, the more you find that, it's not going to kill you. It's only going to make you better. And there's a light at the end of those whys. You're asking the whys because there's a positive reason. And whenever you dive into a scary thought, you find that in the end, you come out a better person. And that's like a lot of really nice reinforcement. And that's also kind of what happens the more you kind of practice changing, the more you practice shedding the old stuff and adopting the new stuff, the more you take a look at really hard experiences, the more you find that every time you do, something good comes out of it. And it sort of inspires you and motivates you to keep doing it. And I know that's what happened for me. That's why I feel like I find so much joy and enjoyment in learning about myself and digging deeper and asking why and really understanding every piece of myself, because over time I learned that the more I do, the better I feel, the lighter I feel, the easier my day is, the easier my life is. And like the better my life has unraveled, the more I've taken a look at the things I thought I didn't want to take a look at. And that's really magical, and I think that's really good to know. Because it also sort of touches on the idea that the more you avoid something, the more fear you put onto something, the bigger it gets. So something that could have started out really small, if you put like a lot of energy into it, a lot of that, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and then it becomes into this big monster that feels impossible to confront because of all this energy you put onto it of like, oh my God. And then something that could have been really small becomes this big thing. And then when you approach it, it disintegrates. And you're like, oh, it wasn't that big. It was just big because of all the suspense around it, So yeah, try not to put so much energy onto the big stuff, and the more weight you put into it's kind of like the more you think about something you don't want to think about, the bigger of a deal it feels like, and it feels really heavy. It's kind of like something I always try to tell myself. I try to tell myself not to focus so much on my weakness, but to focus more on my strength, because the more you the more energy you put into the things you're not good at, the less energy you have available to put into the things you are really good at. And I think it's important for us to recognize our weaknesses and be like, okay, here are my flaws, here are my imperfections. That's fine. But let me actually put a focus on what I am really good at. And let me actually find ways in which I can turn my imperfections, similar to what the podcast was saying. How can I turn my imperfections and my flaws into a strength? How can I find the positives in the negative? So if I'm really impatient, in certain situations, like the podcast said, being impatient isn't so great. So where are situations where I can lean into my impatience? Because what could be impatience in one situation could be considered being a go-getter in a different situation. So it's all about perspective, So I think perspective is a big theme that comes up too with shadow work and looking at the stuff you don't want to look at and all that stuff. So I think the biggest reminder I think that helped me and is continuing to help me whenever I'm working on integrating my shadow is reminding myself that there isn't this big monster, this big thing coming after me. All these things are part of me. I think a movie that comes up for me is the movie Black Swan. Now, Black Swan is pretty dark, but I think a big message of the movie is the message that the main character is battling herself. And her downfall was that she couldn't figure out how to integrate her shadow, and her shadow had a really bad relationship. So at the end of the movie, she ends up dying because she was so pressed on going after this enemy, and the enemy was herself. She was her worst enemy, and there was so much hatred and anger that in killing her shadow, she killed herself, because you can't kill your shadow. You can't get rid of it. It's you, and it's not out to get you. It wants to feel seen. I think the whole thing behind a shadow and why it feels so dark and scary is because it feels neglected and it feels abandoned. So when you start listening to it and trying to figure out ways to really integrate it, then it doesn't feel so scary. It doesn't feel so dark. It doesn't feel so heavy. It feels more manageable. So I think that's a big point that I also wanted to make. And I think also something that you don't really hear a lot of people talking about is what to do when you find yourself in the deepest depths of the void, of the darkness, of your shadow. Because I find those sort of things can creep up on you. And then when you're in it, it can feel really scary because you're like, I don't know how dark it's going to get. Because I think there was one time I was talking to someone about sort of like facing your anxieties, and I was telling them how like, I understand how like sitting with the hard stuff is really tough because I think a common fear is if I let myself sit with something, I don't know how bad it's gonna get. And I think people get scared of sitting with the bad emotions because they're like, if I let myself feel all this stuff, I don't know, like, what am I gonna be drawn to? Like, what am I gonna do? And people get scared that they're gonna do something really harmful, I think, to themselves, or they're gonna get into a really bad headspace. But I think, when you do it, you find that you don't. I know for me personally, I let myself really be dramatic, like, and I'll get dramatic. Like, when I'm in a really bad headspace, I get so dramatic that I don't think anyone's ever seen it because it only really happens when I'm by myself. And I will let myself sink into a sadness like nothing else, knowing that it's just like I'm just letting myself feel it. Like, it's not that serious, because it ends up like, if you let yourself feel all that stuff, you feel better. And then you find that you take a nap, you go to sleep, you cry it out, and then you wake up the next day and you feel pretty good. You're like, I got it all out my system. I feel pretty sweet. And like when you're in that deep sadness, like you could say that you could want to think and say and do the craziest things, the saddest things, the most tragic things. And then like if you just let yourself let it out just for the sake of letting it out, like through writing, through thinking about it, through music, like let yourself listen to the saddest song you could possibly listen to. Watch the saddest movie, or like do whatever you need to do to allow that emotion to breathe. And then, or cry as long as you need to. And then you find that when you really let it all out, you feel better. And then you're like, oh wow, that's all I needed. Because I know like I've felt the depths of sadness. And then every time I do it, I feel a lot better. And I don't do anything crazy. Like, it's just the fact, like, it's kind of like a dog's bark is bigger than its bite. Like, it will bark, 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 but you're not gonna do anything crazy, like all that stuff. So a lot of it is just like giving it a space without getting scared. And I think that has to do with trusting yourself by understanding that all these parts are you. A lot of the things you wonder, you get the answer to, you find, with enough patience and stuff and thinking and letting. I think the biggest thing though is paying attention to everything that comes up for you and not really ignoring it or thinking it's dumb. Your mind oftentimes won't show you things for no reason. Whatever thoughts come up are coming up for a reason. Whatever you feel, you're feeling for a reason. And you really have to give everything space. It doesn't have to be a lot of space, but give it a chance. Give it a chance to see, like, maybe is there something there? And maybe there's something there. Or maybe there's nothing there. But at least you, like, gave it a chance to see, like, if something was there. And I think that's a big thing, too, when you're kind of working on yourself, is trying to give everything a shot. If you feel something, what am I feeling? If you're like, if you feel something tough, you're like, whoa, I feel really weird. Looking up, be like, am I supposed to be paying attention to something? Like, taking a look, taking a pause, really, like, feeling what's going on, that sort of thing. So I hope that wasn't too messy. I hope some of that made sense. And I think that's really all I wanted to say about this for today, because I was watching that movie Thunderbolts, and I'm listening to a lot of podcasts, so my brain has been thinking a lot of stuff. And I guess I'll just leave you with, please try to feed your brain some vegetables today. Try to listen to something that will feed your mind. I mean, if you want to watch reality TV, watch reality TV. But try to balance it out with something that you will gain some value from, If you're feeling a little down, listen to something motivational. If you feel like a little not too great, try to find something that'll lift up your mood, Try to do something that will help your head get the nutrients that it needs. It's kind of like if you eat a hamburger, try to drink a bottle of water. I mean, you can eat a hamburger, but try to do something to like balance it out. You know what I mean? I think that's how a good way to approach your mind. If you're gonna watch something just for fun, try to balance that out with watching something else that's more educational. So, hope that made sense. And I hope you have a nice day.